Hi, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Dee Hati Diaries episode 6. First of all, I'm so sorry for the technical issues that we had to start a bit later than we've hoped for. And without further ado, on behalf of Dee Hati Center for Grief, Bereavement and Trauma, we are very grateful for everyone's presence tonight. My name is Nazwan. I am one of your hosts for this very important conversation.
And I'm Dr. Hanif, as usual, your co-host with Nazwan. And it is an honor for me to be here with all of you. And thank you for taking your time to join us in what promises to be a meaningful discussion, inshallah.
That's right. Tonight we'll be addressing a topic that is often avoided but very crucial for us to talk about, which is grief after a suicide. It is a silent struggle that many experience, but too often society actually fails to understand and acknowledge. So, our goal tonight is to actually provide a safe space and an open space for those who have experienced such a loss and to offer some insights and support to help navigate through this incredible difficult journey.
That's right, Nazwan. We are here to break the silence, to reduce the stigma, and to show that grieving after suicide is not something to be ashamed of. Everyone's experience is different, but by sharing our stories and insight, we hope to offer some guidance and healing for anyone who is affected by this type of loss.
Yep. So this conversation is not only for those who have lost someone to suicide, but also for those who support them. So whether you're a family, a friend, or even a professional, we encourage everyone to try to stay engaged. Perhaps ask us some questions if you have any during the session, and feel free to drop in through our comment section. We will try to address them at the end of the webinar.
Yeah, and tonight's session, we are lucky to have two incredible speakers. The first one, Puan Alia, or also known as Kak Ngah, who is a suicide loss survivor and a founder of AWAS, who has walked this difficult path. And our second guest is Dr. Ravivarma, my friends, a psychiatrist with deep expertise in trauma and grief. Thank you very much, you guys, for agreeing to join us today.
Thank
But
you.
yeah, thank you so much.
Right. So we always believe that the best way for us to understand this difficult topic is through the sharing of one story. And we feel that to begin this conversation, we are honored to hear from Kak Ngah, who has walked this difficult path through her grief. And Kak Ngah, your courage in sharing your story all these years has been a big inspiration to many. And we are, again, very truly grateful that you have agreed to want to share with us your story. Would you be so kind as to want to share with us your experience on your journey? How difficult was it when it comes to coping, and what helped you in your healing path?
Yeah, before Kak Ngah answer the questions, I think it's good for me to just give a reminder because this could be a quite what Kak Ngah going to share after this going to be quite difficult for some people out there. So we would like for you to take care of yourself if you have any difficult emotions during our session tonight. Please talk to someone, take some time to comfort yourself, and perhaps you can come back and uh, continue listening to us. So Kak Ngah, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nazwan. Thanks so much, Dr. Hanif. Hi, Dr. Ravi. We meet again, and thank you everyone for tuning in. Like they all said, it is very much a very difficult topic, and I hope please allow me to be vulnerable because um, as we know, I have lost someone to suicide. It's been a very painful experience and journey, healing journey. But I hope I can share what I have gone through, in the hopes that people will feel like they have hope. Like when you have lost somebody to suicide, sometimes you feel like it's the end of the world, which it did for me actually. Um, to answer to your question, Nazwan and Dr. Hanif, it's actually I've suffered a long, long time. I lost my loved one to suicide in 2013. Um, and ever since that day, the pain is there. It is still there. There is not a day goes by that I do not think of my loved one. I do not feel the guilt, or I do not feel, um, the pain. The pain is really unbearable, I can say. Even though 11 years has passed, but the grief is still there. It's just that I have learned to channel, I have learned to cope and manage with it. But rest assured that if any one of you have lost someone to suicide, do know that there is hope, and it's not the end of the world, inshallah. Although it felt like it when I lost my loved one to suicide. Unfortunately, until today, I cannot tell who. I have made a promise to the mother that um, I shall not reveal who this person is, but he was a loved one. And unfortunately, 11 years ago, the mental health scene was very, very bad. In the media, in the internet. It was viral. It was all over the news. Unfortunately, it was also in the internet, the Facebook, WhatsApp. It was everywhere. And those days, 11 years ago, there was no discussion on safe media reporting and things like that. So it was really, really bad. The videos, the pictures, everything was out there, unfortunately. Um, but the saddest part was that it did not happen in public. I understand, there's a lot of public, people with cameras, dash cams now, but because it happened in a privacy of a home, it shouldn't have leaked. And unfortunately, the pictures, the videos were leaked. And because of that, I was dealing with a lot of anger. I felt like there was a lot of injusticeness happening. There was no privacy, um, and it felt like they did not, whoever, whether it's the police or media, we don't know who leaked the pictures, but it was leaked all over, and it was really, really messy. So we, the people impacted by the suicide, we could read all the comments, all the statement, all the negative remarks. They say, he was a low life, the iman, he's going to hellfire, awful, terrible things. And until today, it's still on the internet, unfortunately. So the anger was there. There was a lot of anger. I feel like it could have been dealt properly, but I could not grieve properly because there was a lot of things going on. The media, the police. I had to do the, what do you call that, pengecaman. I had to go to the mortuary and did uh, um, the pengecaman of the body and all that, and it is still traumatic for me. Although 11 years have gone by, but I still remember everything vividly. And the hardest part is I am a graduate in psychology. I've graduated in psychology. I have a degree in psychology, on top of which I have worked in Hospital Miri many, many years ago as pegawai psychology. So that did not help really, because um, I felt like, um, the guilt in me, like I should have seen the sign. I blame myself for not helping out, for not reaching out to him. 11 years ago, we do not discuss about um, about mental health struggles, and the fact that he was a guy in his 20s. He was a college student, I guess the notion of boys don't cry, boys are supposed to be strong and all that. I saw him not able to sleep at night. I saw him struggling. I saw him, having a lot of anger. And in retrospect, thinking about him, I feel like perhaps he was dealing with, probably, I don't know, probably bipolar. There was a lot of characteristics there, but unfortunately, I did not open my mouth. I could not ask him. I thought, or, just the normal teenage or young adult struggles, and someday he'll reach out to friends. Um, I remember his mother reaching out to me and said, oh, please help, please help. He was standing at the ledge. But I remember also saying, um, no, don't worry about it. He just wants some attention. I remember saying all these things, and I'm sure a lot of us are perhaps guilty of saying and brushing it off, just like that. And I am ashamed until today. I am ashamed of not reaching out to him, of not asking him if he was okay, if he needed help, just because the dynamic of our relationship, it was just difficult. We don't discuss this kind of conversations. We don't discuss emotions and things like that. So I still remember everything. Of course, he did not. I remember when I said, "Oh, don't worry about it." He's just asking for attention. At that point of time, he didn't die by suicide, but 3 months after that, 3 months later, he died by suicide. And of course, we know that one of the risk factors is that people, when they attempt suicide, or they're suicidal, they're thinking of whether it's thinking of suicide, or trying to attempting to take their life. They are already they're already vulnerable and at risk. So it's not easy. I must say I had my own self stigma, when I was dealing with this. I was ashamed, and because nobody, was talking about mental health back then, and nobody was even suicide, talking about suicide is just something that is so taboo even until now. Since I became the founder of AWAS, I remember people, teachers in school, inviting me to give a talk in a school about teen suicide, but they said, Kak Ngah, can you please not say the word bunuh diri? Can you please not use the word suicide? And I was like, they want to talk about it. They want to learn about suicide, but at the same time, they're still worried that having this kind of discussions will actually encourage people, to want to, people who are already vulnerable, maybe to take their lives. But actually, perhaps Dr. Ravi will tell on later, about the research that shows that, actually no, when you ask somebody if they're suicidal, or they're thinking about struggling with their mental health, or dealing with any kind of suicidal thoughts, asking them if they're suicidal will not make them become suicidal. It's almost like they say, like, if you're a smoker, you don't smoke, when people offer you, or you smell, it doesn't make you want to smoke. But if you're already a smoker, that means if you're already vulnerable, thinking about all these things, and actually having someone asking you, it will make you feel actually, like cared for, feel heard, feel like, oh, somebody noticed me, but that was my mistake. I did not ask him. I did not went to him, and I was just hoping that, oh, he'll confide with friends and he'll be okay. But so that happened in 2013, and that dragged on. My pain, my suffering, dragged on and on. Until I could not cope anymore. I was dealing with my own self stigma. I always felt like everybody knew. Like the moment I walked out of the house, everybody knew that I am a suicide loss survivor. Like I feel like everybody was talking about me, everybody was talking about him, everybody was, like like putting me down, and like I feel like worthless at that time. And the hard part was when I was dealing with another grief. Um, so I lost my loved one to suicide at 2013. And then I lost my father. He died by cancer at 2017. So there was another grief that hits. In the meantime, from 2013, 2017, I was like, I would say a volcano, like magma, like the it was boiling and boiling and boiling, waiting to erupt. And when that another thing happened, another death happened, I just exploded. During the way I was coping, at that time, I even opened up a business at that time. I was doing some business, trying to make myself busy. It was a startup, so I was very, very busy, to the point where I wake up early in the morning, I go back and sleep. I don't think that was how I dealt with for years, many, many years. And then 6 years down the road, I became very, I had cry spells. I had cry spells every now and then, but in 2000, only in 2019, I remember vividly, September 2019, it broke, I was, really like literally broken. That was the time when I could not cope anymore. I was dealing with depression. I know I was depressed, I know I was very depressed, but I was just pretending like I'm okay, trying to make myself busy, mask it. But at 2000, September 2019, that was the time when I had a panic attack. I was driving on my way to Seremban, I remember, and suddenly I could not breathe. I was sweating profusely, and I had like I felt like I was going to have a heart attack. I could not breathe, and my stomach was churning. I was really scared. I was alone in the car. Nobody was, nobody disturbed me or anything like that. I had to pull over and calm myself down. And that was already 2019. And that by the time 6 years after grieving, so long, my best friend was the one who said, Alia, don't you think it's time for you to reach out for help, because you've been dealing with this for a long, long time. So yeah, that was the turning point. I surrendered myself. I said enough of this self stigma. If because I was also dealing with a lot of suicidal thoughts at that time. I was like, I was not happy. I was just miserable. I feel like everything is my fault. I feel like my children will be better off without me. I was dealing with suicidal thoughts. I was not suicidal in my action. Like there was no suicidal behavior, but I was already thinking a lot about, like, perhaps I should just leave this world because I'm done. I'm done being in pain. I'm done being a burden to other people. And I remember those days before going to seek for help, going to see a psychiatrist in September. My kids, I could not function as a mother. I could not send my kids to school. I think about almost 3 months, 2 to 3 months, they were not going to school. I was just in bed. I didn't have the energy. I had my full blown depression at that time. So when I went to the doctor, they diagnosed me with depression and then anxiety. And I still remember, speaking of stigma, I said, what if I don't want to take medication? What if I don't want, um, because there's a lot of stigma surrounding taking meds as well, and that was the time I feel like, no, I don't want to add more to it. And she said, if you don't deal with it now, you have gone from depression to anxiety, and if you don't deal with it by medication, you're going to be probably a lot worse, and we don't want you to end up being depressive psychosis and all that. I remember those days when I was dealing with all of this. um, I did a lot of journaling. When I became more stabilized, like emotionally stabilized, I remember ordering books, a lot of books from Amazon. I just wanted to know what other suicide loss survivor feel like, what it's like to be someone who is bereaved by suicide, because I felt all alone. I felt isolated. I felt you know, like I could not speak to anyone. Like people don't understand me. I felt really alone. I had a lot of anger, a lot of guilt. I remember going to the grave. This was many many days after he passed away. I went to the grave and I was crying and cursing, and I was having a lot of anger at the grave, and I was like shouting at the grave. I was like, how dare you do this? How dare you do this to me? How dare you do this to all of us? Like, did you not feel the love? Did you not know that I loved you? And how can you do this? You're causing us pain. Like I remember like shouting and screaming, and I know I was just losing my mind at that time. I was just losing my sanity, and one thing after another. But with the medication, it has helped me so much. I must say, I really appreciate my psychiatrist. I appreciate the support that I needed. I remember 11 years ago, 4 days after my loved one died by suicide, right? I remember going to an NGO, trying to seek for support. Those days, still zaman Surat Khabar, I remember going to Petronas. I saw, it was all over the newspaper. It was, the headline, the front page was there. And I remember going to this NGO and I said, please help me. I brought like a stack of newspapers, different kind, Utusan Malaysia, Berita Harian, and different kind. And I said, please help me. I am in a lot of pain. I was just, crying and crying and crying. I said, I need help. I don't know what to do with this pain. Please help me. And I remember there were four of them. They looked at each other and they said, so sorry, Alia. Excuse me. They said, so sorry, Alia. We don't have any support for survivors, suicide loss survivors. We only have support for people who are suicidal. And I remember feeling rejected. Like, how come there's no support for me? Like, I thought this is a place for people who are suicidal. I thought it's more or less the same kind, like. And then later on, of course, they took my number and everything, and I left. They said they'll call me. But I remember feeling like really like the life is hopeless. Like I'm helpless, and no one can help me. Excuse me. So it was just painful, one pain after another, and I started the way I cope. I think the best thing that I did for myself in this journey of healing was to start uh, an Instagram. I started AWAS. At that point of time, it was not an NGO yet. It was not a program under Yayasan Direct Care. I just started this Instagram page. All I wanted was to seek for people who have lost loved ones to suicide. So what I did was I wrote and wrote a lot of my, whatever my heart feel, whatever I was, the grief and the pain and all that. So people reach out to me, people from different parts of the world reach out to me and say thank you for your post. I could resonate with it. I have lost my brother to suicide, and this other person said, I'm a Malaysian in Japan who have lost my boyfriend to suicide. Like people from all over the world, all walks of life, reach out to me. And after a few months, in June was the time when I feel like, I want to make this official. That's why the name Kak Ngah, actually, when I was, sorry, when I started AWAS, I was really scared to use my name. There was no face. I didn't appear. All I wanted was a medium to just communicate with people who understand, people who can know what it's like to lose someone by suicide. Um, and that's why I use Kak Ngah. And actually, my loved one called me by that name. So losing one person calling me Kak Ngah through AWAS, I have now have many, many, many people calling me Kak Ngah. Although it's my advocacy name or nickname, whatever you want to call it, but I feel like I'm doing something. I feel like I want to change this pain into purpose. I want for people to know that he did not die in vain. There must be an explanation to this. There must be something that can be done to support not only people who are suicidal, but people who are grieving, bereaved by suicide, and are in pain. And they are the ones silenced, behind closed doors, crying, um, in pain, and don't know what to do. So yeah, I guess that's a little bit of my story. That's how I started my journey. And now I am connected with all of you and a lot more other people who are in this together, trying to support people who are struggling with their mental health and struggling with losing loved one to suicide. Mm.
Thank you so much, Kak Ngah, for your sharing such a personal and profound experience. Your story is so powerful. I'm sure it resonates with many people who's watching us tonight. And it takes a lot of strength to speak about it. Uh, can can sense how painful the journey for the past 11 years uh, after go through that such incidents. And for all the listener out there, all of us here actually suicide loss survivors in many ways. As Kak Ngah mentioned earlier, she lost uh, her loved one to suicide, and the suicide not only affect the family members, their siblings, the relative or the neighbors, but also those who treat them. Um, as a doctor who also had some connection with the patients, they also affected by the suicide. If I may share how suicide also affected not only personally but also professionally, um, is when I also lost a patient to suicide. Uh, I had received one case of suicide um, in during on call, and as much as I want to help the people around the person who lost to suicide, the family members, the relatives, uh, even the witness. So I thought that I had managed to connect and engage with all the people affected by suicide by that particular case. And then another day when I was on call, I received a case of attempted suicide, a young girl who was attempted suicide, brought to the hospital, in which I had no ideas that it could be related to the first one. Uh, yeah, so until on the second day when we able to talk and interview the patients, actually she who was vulnerable at that time, at that point of time, become one of the first hand witness of the first case of suicide. So after heard the story of her, it really gave me a feeling of, oh, I thought that I able to engage and to give all sort of information to the people who witnessed the suicide case on the first suicide case. But apparently there is still a person who miss from our catchment, our so we cannot engage with this young girl, and eventually she affected by the case. All of course, suicide is multifactorial, which Dr. Ravi will talk about it later. But somehow it one of the factors that makes the girl attempted suicide. So I would like to
If
go
I
to
may
our
add, sorry, Dr. Hanif.
sure.
If I may, thank you for sharing, your about your patient. I'm sure, it will impact your career, somewhat for the rest of your life. But my loved one too, actually, few months before that, his favorite lecturer passed away by suicide. He died by suicide too
Mm.
at the college. So I don't know if that's related, but I can probably say, safe to say, it's somewhat, he was affected by it. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah.
Thank you, Kak Ngah, for tell me that. So if we can continue to our next speaker, my friend, Dr. Ravi, who is a psychiatrist with years of experience in trauma and suicide prevention. Dr. Ravi, we are grateful to have you with us tonight. As we know, grief after a traumatic loss like suicide is often said to be distinct from other form of grief. From your perspective as an expert in this field, how does this type of grief differ both emotionally and psychologically from other losses? To you, Dr. Ravi.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the time, and as well as thank you to the organizers for getting us all together today. I think it was a bit of a challenge just now. Um, I guess we start by just tapping into the lived experience that was shared in this room, and I guess also among our audience, people do want to know, people want to know some answers, and I think that's where the answer to this question starts. It is different. I think it starts with the grief being different. It is a grief that is often very not recognized. We call it disenfranchised grief. It is something where it is not recognized. The people who grieve are not recognized. The loss is not recognized. It is seen as something where you you feel sad in most forms of grief. You feel sad, you feel angry, you feel upset, you feel disappointed, you feel why did it happen and it shouldn't have happened. I could have done this and that. All of that, you feel that, and you feel much more. A lot of emotions that people don't want to speak about, especially why did it happen, who was responsible, and all of that. And imagine experiencing it, and you're not allowed to talk about it, you're not allowed to show it. And it's not like anyone is stopping you, but you know instinctually that this, because it's such a violent act, an act of um, wherein somebody takes their own life, it is seen as something from across time and across history and cultures, where something is, it is unfortunately not unfortunately viewed in such a stigmatized lens because of the pain and sorrow, and I think people interpreted it in that way, that it's such a painful and sorrowful event, that it's so violent, that it's so stigmatized, unfortunately, when in fact it deserves the world of empathy. But in fact, by the fact that people thought it was a great, maybe the way that we thought that, if we shun it enough, we say it enough, it won't happen, but unfortunately it does. And it leaves behind people with so much pain, and often so much pain in isolation. That lack of recognition is why the grief is so different. And when you will grieve alone and you can't grieve, you're not allowed to grieve, you're even sometimes forced to shield those emotions, not from anyone else, but your own self. And that's really, really tough, because grief is is an expression of how we cope with loss. And from that loss, there is growth. But when we can't do that and we can't grieve properly, that's when it becomes very pathological. And suicide loss easily becomes pathological, leads to pathological grief.
Mm, thank you very much, Dr. Ravi. I think that that word is something that we always like to share, educate people about disenfranchised grief. It's that grief where people feel that they are not supposed to grieve, and it's sad that even until now, people still stigmatize against this sort of grief. Even me myself, when I first had to go through this loss, I myself could not call it suicide. I used all sorts of different names except calling it suicide. But and the fact of the matter is, once I realized that this is what happened, this is what it is, that's when I start to accept that, and that is how I help, helps with my own grieving process. So as for the next question, we have heard just now from Dr. Hanif and Kak Ngah about how how traumatic events like suicide can cause a ripple effect. Those who have witnessed it, those who have heard it, and it affects those who are very vulnerable. Could you explain how such events might increase the risk of suicide in those who are already struggling, and what can we do to mitigate this risk?
Right. I guess you're alluding to the transmissibility of suicides, where someone sees and someone copies and someone imitates about suicide. And I really hope that we can use platforms such as this to talk about how real and how causal imitative effects are. There's a lot of research that's done, but however, the uptake of the research in our media behavior and how we communicate to the world often doesn't match. We're still quite a bit far behind because we feel that this needs to be told. Because one way people process grief or people talk about grief is to talk about what happened. But unfortunately, when we share the loss of suicide, especially when you talk about somebody who has died by suicide, and it gets to this group of people who are vulnerable, and they're not they're not some person in isolation. There are quite a lot of people who see themselves in that person who has died, who have lived through people who are in the same environment, same time zone, same conflict, who are facing the same challenges, might think that this could be a way to cope because this person has coped. We learn things from people. There's a lot of learning that we do. And if there is a method, you can give people an idea that if you do this, you die. And that is actually unfortunate that you see in some of the, that is unfortunate that all of this happens in a unsafe or whether it's a media report where you can actually have all of these elements come in, and somebody who consumes that media or somebody who hears such a communication or consumes such communication, that could be a WhatsApp post, a WhatsApp message, a WhatsApp story, an Instagram post, any of those kinds of media posts where what happens is that when they get that, they get all of this access, right? I feel that even we become sometimes a little bit callous when we talk about suicide loss, we talk about how that person died, and that is just that, and that little, that part, that tiny part of that person, which sometimes now becomes that entire narrative for that person's life. That really doesn't help with that grief. And I just want to share a bit about this. When this because I was looking through some old notes before coming for this webinar, and surprisingly I came, we live in what you call as a polymediated age where there's so many types of media, and that really messes up with people's grief. I think Alia has shared so well how it messes up with the grief. It seems like the people who are technically, if you look at it, someone dies, the most affected people are friends, family, therapists, and all of that. And suddenly everybody else has a say on your grief. Everybody else has a comment on the person that you knew, and they didn't know that person in the same way you knew, and suddenly everybody has an opinion, and that opinion also affects your grief. And it's really wherein you get very much traumatized with the grief. So besides this whole imitative or copycat or contagion effect, whatever you call it, the means that wherein that communication happens in that process of grieving, you also affect another person's grieving. So that's the next question. How is there only one way to grieve? There is a lot of ways to grieve, but we have to be mindful that how we grieve and how we put it out to the world, um, sometimes affects others. And it's just like any other action on earth that you do. There are things that you want to do, you feel like doing, but it may not be the best way for another person. I'm going to give you a very simple example. You are in a shop alone, you're having snack or roti canai or whatever that is, and you decide to open your favorite a TikTok reel, and you're like watching, and you didn't use headphones, you're using it loud. You realize it's okay for you, but it could be very disturbing for somebody else, and somebody else could be extremely annoyed. And that's how the same thing can affect people in different manners. That's just a bit about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
So,
if I can add,
hmm, sure.
unfortunately, I think yes, some people are grieving. Some people grieve, or they're so awed or shocked, in disbelief by whoever died by suicide. Especially because it's such a tragic death, right? But the pain I feel becomes amplified when it's being sensationalized by the media, like it becomes clickbait lah, it becomes like, and then people make fun of this person. I remember reading on one suicide case, not suicide attempt case. This lady wanted to jump over, it was a Klang River, and people make fun, say, or she didn't, she couldn't do it because she saw crocodile or something like that, and then people made fun of it. It's to me, it's like, it's just so it makes there's no empathy in it. Sometimes people just forward stuff without thinking, of the consequences, the impact it leaves to other people who are looking at it or reading it, I feel. So
Yep, I agree with that actually. It looks like uh, how we how we look at things, where you actually see that as it's instead of news item, and to see those people as real people with a lot of emotions and all of that lived experience that has brought them to that point, and them making a different decision. And I would say in many people who are actually very suicidal, and if they had seen something like how you've described that croc and everything, people would be startled and people would get this thing because it may not fit within that thing. And I think that also comes in with a very simplistic view of how suicidal people get there. We still don't know, what actually brings a person. We really don't know how many factors are there that why that this person that goes so fast to suicide attempt versus somebody who lives years with it. But there's so many things in a person's life, and that's how that multifactorial causation of suicide comes in, and there's so many factors. But what happens is that people who look and consume this, they see it in such a myopic and simplistic view, and they put comments. And I think that doesn't even stop with suicide loss. It goes quite across media, I guess.
mm,
Yeah, I agree with that, Dr. Ravi. That's why we are try to bring everyone tonight to give some ideas for others to really look at this situation with empathy, because you cannot see that the case as just a case, because there is a human being behind that. So and another challenges, if I can pick from what Kak Ngah shared earlier, is the difficulty to asking help, because sometimes asking help is one of the most toughest thing to say in our life, right? So so Dr. Ravi, from your point of view, what would you say are the red flags or warning signs that indicate someone in this after losing someone to suicide should seek support from a mental health professional? What are the warning signs that you can help us to understand?
Right. I think I'm going to answer that question in two folds, and I think we need to look at it two folds. Let's all ask ourselves, if I need help, when would I seek help? When would I not seek help? If my tire is flat, I'll seek for help. I have no problem. I have no problem calling the the insurance number on my car if my car's tire is flat or my engine knocks out. But if I'm having a psychological distress, I find it very hard to call 15555.
Correct.
So let's look at that. It's actually really much related to us because that involves admitting a vulnerability. It involves how you will be seen. I'm going to put it out even for the healthcare professionals that are listening to us here. How easy is it for you to seek help? It is not. It is absolutely not easy because there is so much of losing face, the face culture there, so much of difficulty in getting help. And sometimes when we get into a rut, we often get into a rut because of many things, and that's where a lot of our hidden intersectional identities all come into play. That's where you may be seen as a shy person or a scared person or a person who has this and all of that, and that involves a lot of bravery, because I think that's something that we need to really acknowledge when our clients, especially, or people who seek help come, is that it takes immense amount of courage and bravery to get to that place to ask for help. I think that's the important part of it, and that's where probably we need to look at in how we can summon that for people to get help, because that's where we need to go there to get help. It requires that much bravery because it is not easy. And what are the signs that and we are expecting people, and this is where we are expecting people to get help in a situation where they are at their worst. It's really very hard when we're not feeling bad enough to ask for help. When you think, let's put that situation. Often when you should get help is when you're having warning signs where you're actually repeatedly thinking about death. Suicidal ideations are there. suicidal ideations have started coming, or you have a sign of a major mental illness. Just holding on to the first thought. A lot of people, suicidal ideations come and grow through many people, and most of the time, because sometimes when things get very very tough, our coping mechanism just goes off. We just feel like that, and sometimes it
Mm.
goes off, and then you have a good set of coping mechanisms. Your safety plan is good to get through it, and the urges to hurt oneself or to die goes off. But if you keep getting those thoughts, or you have an illness that you have signs of depression or anxiety, very simple. How do you know you have a mental disorder, especially ones that still confer insight, like mood disorders, which you know for yourself, is that you're feeling terrible or for a very long time. When that long time is about weeks, about 2 weeks or so, it's already a good sign that says something is wrong. My sleep is affected. I can't eat well. I'm not myself. I cannot work well. I find it very interesting that we could always tap into the lived experience of our clients that come in, and what made them seek help. Asking that question is that I can't eat, I can't sleep, I can't do this, I cannot function as a father, I cannot work. All of those things, when your function is affected, that's when you should get help. So I think just playing around this, when you know that if the moment you feel that something is, you can't cope and you need care, that's when you get for that you when that's when you seek help. I'm quite sure my answer is not very exhaustive, but I'm just looking at it at the point of the person versus what someone else sees on the person. But once you know that the fact that the important question is, why should I seek help? It is because there is, and there always is, a way to feel better when you seek help, and because someone can help you keep the fire alive when you struggle yourself, when there's so much water damping on you, there could be another hand that can hold that hope for you. And that is something that is a message that we need to get across, that getting help is not that people are not trying to solve your problem or anything, but people can keep the hope up. And that is exceptionally important in getting help, because there's always the role to get that. And I have found recently more people get help. More people in different situations get help. Professionals are, well, they seem less threatening as opposed to what they were before. The understanding towards mental health conditions has changed. Sometimes it takes a bit of courage. If you don't want to see a person face to face with someone you know, there is always anonymous help online, phone crisis calls. It takes a step, and you can always build up to it, and often services link with each other. So what you do need to go is that, how do we get the courage to go and get help when we can't? And let's say it's too difficult, sometimes you can get someone you trust to bring you to help, and I think that's also important, and that shouldn't be seen as a sign of weakness. Sometimes getting someone to follow you, or asking someone, and or someone bringing over, and it's so important. When you ask that person doesn't dismiss you. I have found
Mhm.
many people who have come to get help is when they were not dismissed, but they were validated to get help. So help seeking should be seen as a sign of strength and should be validated. I think if that is something that we repeat and we practice, should be great. Should be great for the future.
Very nicely said, Doctor. Um, I agree that it's difficult for people to want to come up. Actually, even I myself also, I always have difficulty trying to want to open up and trying, and that word validate, or, and a lot of people, they sometimes they don't seem to understand what it means, but another way to put it is to acknowledge, right? I think probably like more layman is like acknowledge your feelings. If you are sad, it's okay to say you're sad. And I guess you can say I'm quite happy to say that compared to 10 years ago now, our scene in mental health is way better. Our I guess you can say our mental health literacy, although it is not there compared to Western countries, but it is significantly better than it was 10 years ago. So thanks to, we have a lot of crisis helplines now. We have Befrienders, Talian Heal, we have Miasa, we have AWAS, and we also have Dee Hati, of course. And all these are working together to ensure that people are able to get the help they need. So when we're talking about people getting the help they need, prevention becomes the key word that we always try to focus on. So Dr. Ravi, what kind of strategies do you think we can implement to reduce the risk of suicide among those navigating this kind of unique grief?
Yeah. All right. I think it all boils down to this, that why people, suicide loss survivors, are at increased risk. I think we spoke about the fact that the grief itself is very traumatic. The grief itself is intense. So it's very bad when you get isolated. Then you see your usual grief, I'm not discounting grief for the loss of a parent or etc. and all of that. The usual grief pattern, if let's say you lose someone, you have all those rituals and all those functions that follow, culturally, and culturally all those things is done for the living as opposed to the dead. I mean, as more for the living, so that we can learn and come to terms, and also with the death. It is very hard sometimes when sometimes there's so much shame in suicide loss and so much embarrassment because it happened to us. And then there is that stigmatized lens, wherein somebody who died by suicide often get labeled for a lot of other reasons, like they are not they are otherized, really otherized. And with the otherization goes with a whole lot of them who are associated with them also get otherized. It's a beautiful, no, not that sarcastic, it's a very uh, a bandwagon where we put people in, send them all and keep them far, far away. Like we don't send them to the caves or up the hills. That includes the people who knew them, their family, their friends, their therapists. There was a time where people who have doctors or professionals have lost patients to suicide are often seen what it was your fault, made to feel responsible when in fact cause is multifactorial, made to feel what you didn't do. All of that was, you put them away, so that puts another intensity to that. So what happens with all of these people is it puts them at an increased risk of isolation, and then the lived experience, the negative experience the negative lived experience, and also the shared risk factors, and probably the cognitive capacity also puts them at an increased risk of suicide. So I think that's so important to start there. Really, really important for us to recognize that all of these people are at an increased risk of suicide. So next would be to come back to how would we want to help them? Is that the question? How would we want to help them, or how do we support them? I guess the way to support, and I think it's a word that was that the question as one? I hope I did not deviate by giving that whole risk factor
It's
thing.
it's more like what kind of strategies do you think can be implemented to reduce the risk of suicide?
Yep. So at the individual, we want to look at how we want to help them. All right. The simple strategies is what we can do as people around them. I think the most important thing is to acknowledge that this is a loss and a grief, and to keep to tap to treat is to treat disenfranchised grief is to treat it as grief, to allow them to grieve. To how you would check on someone who has lost a parent, you should do that for the person who has lost someone to suicide. How would you include them in the loss? You'll do collections, etc. You do that, you do support them, you ask them, and also keep a tab on them whether they are going through grief in a way that, the signs that we discussed earlier, and help them get help. Okay, that is what we all can do as people in society. But what can systems do? We have post-vention services. This is a unique form of loss that mandates and particularly presents with an increased risk of suicidal behavior and also a lot of suffering. We call it, as I would say, I think I remember in a meeting I pitched that it is an increased traumatic load in the community. So it requires also a public health approach. Uh, some places and some parts of Malaysia, we're already working on how to develop a post-vention service within the community. And then it's still very much in pockets in some parts where uh, help is delivered to it. We first work on identifying who is affected. That's actually quite tough. I think Hanif put it up really well. It's really tough. We can't get anyone. You can look at the Public Health England framework. It requires a lot. When you want to develop something to help people, how do you help people? You want to look at how to recognize who's affected. That takes a while. In fact, it does. You will talk often more the people who get help are the family, the immediate family. But the people who don't turn up, the friends, our friends are forgotten, therapists are forgotten. You have to look at everyone, and you need to have a comprehensive delivery where we have to touch base with everyone and look at what are their needs and to see what we can support them. And at and in Crux, these activities don't just mean about going and checking on how you're doing. Sometimes it's real practical help. Um, if you would allow me, is it okay if I share some post-vention experiences on how things, what people would need on the immediate ground? So we run a service in Miri, so I guess I can share some experiences of what we have seen. We have seen people who are in tears. Well, that's people might think that's expected, but they could be on in tears for all the while until you might be talking with them for about an hour, so that nothing is actually moving. Sometimes people are so angry that why this happened, and the anger could just displace on yourself. Displace to the provider. So you have to allow the holding space of all these intense emotions. Sometimes people are so at loss that something so bad has happened, and maybe they don't have relatives, they don't even know how to bring the deceased for a funeral. Where do we go, what to do? Money, those kind of social services, or we call it social services. Why did I say social services? This is actually often purview on the social medical social services in the hospital or anywhere, or practical help, where to go to get a casket, etc., and all of that, these kind of things. If there is a young person who has died and is in school, what do we do with the locker? What do we do with the chair? What do we do? Those kind of advice could be so helpful in the immediate frame. And so there's a lot that we can do. And there is often a very important media component to this, handling how media reports it. Suicides need to be reported. I think that's so important, and I hope that message doesn't get lost, because we need to talk about suicide so that more investment happens. But what we shouldn't is talk about it in a way that's irresponsible. So all those strategic efforts form a post-vention service. And in order for this post-vention service to act, we cannot be just putting it on healthcare workers. It is cross-sectoral. You need social services, lived experience people. And I really want to underpin that role of lived experience, because at that time, sometimes people can only open up to someone who has gone through that, and not somebody who is, because you can only feel safe when you know that person might have gone through something similar. So it's very important that post-vention services are lived experience, designed, advised, and probably one day delivered. So all of this requires a lot of investment. Investment means money. Money is a very contentious word, but that is actually a very important strategy. Continuous investment in development. So you have to have a strategy. You have to get workforce. You have to support the workforce, and it is not easy being this workforce. So you need to support the workforce itself. The workforce needs to be supported in order to support people, and hopefully, as we go on and as services develop, as if they have done over the world, they will connect and network and reach within each community, and each community becomes safe. So even when there is a fire, you have that fire hydrant there. That's how a post-vention service should look like. It should be like a building where everything should be safe. And eventually, you build your building so safe there's no fire, but the fire hydrant is always there. That's how I view a post-vention service should look like.
Ah, thank you
Nice.
so much, Dr. Ravi. If I can extend probably my last questions for you regarding these post-vention services, since you have the experience in Miri, uh, and because we know that our audience can be coming from also professional background like us, what is your advice for those who not really familiar with these post-vention services to start with and to offer their help to those who need the helps? What is your advice, Dr. Ravi?
Yep, and that's a highly controversial question that you have asked me, because I have to tell people how to do their work. That's quite a tough one, but let's look at going back to the previous answer, and I'm thinking about, because I was looking back at the question again. Um, in order to build a post-vention service, you would want a service that has multiple components. you want to look at healthcare providers, you want to look at all those people. You also need to look into the community strength. Empowering the community matters, right? And that it has to be also community led, right? So I think that's where our healthcare providers would want to look at. And I'm going to give an example about, let's say you don't know what to do, what should you do? Okay, I'm completely clueless. I recently faced a situation wherein we were asked to support, where we were requested, if support was requested for somebody who had a family who had experienced homicide loss. Okay, that's very unusual. I know, how do you go about it? It's terrible. It's completely out of the field. It's a curveball, I guess. How do you support? So you start thinking. You start thinking, and you actually want to look at finding out what are the needs of the people. So if let's say, let's look at, as if suicide loss is alien to you, you have people who have lost by this thing. I think the first thing you want to know is, if let's say you're a professional and this loss happens within your service, within a client. So I think the first thing to maybe check on is what happens when you have a doctor-patient relationship or a therapist-patient relationship and they die by suicide. What do we do? What do you experience? You experience a lot of pain in this thing. And I think first thing is maybe checking up on your colleagues. I think that would be something that it's not too hard to do within the same organization. Doesn't require so much funding. That can be done very informally, but better you can formalize it as well, like keep it accountable. So that's the first step. The next bit of it, if it's the person who has passed on and the disease comes within your service, so you actually have a point of contact with the individual. Sometimes colleagues think that person die already, the person not going to come to our clinic already, or come to a hospital. Not really true. If you are a service, which actually, if you have the forensic services and the deceased is coming to the mortuary, I think you could actually have an opportunity to connect with the family, seeing what they need. You can look at it in a very step-by-step manner, or looking at how that goes there. But how do you want to educate yourself on what to say, what not to say, how to say, what do I say? I mean, what if they say that I didn't do a good job, or all of those kind of many questions that come in. I get getting yourself trained is something that really, really helps. Getting involved with what postvention, getting to know what postvention is. It's all activities around for the bereaved due to the loss of suicide. It's as simple as that. Around, for, by, bereaved, and this thing. I'm quite sure the definition by Anderson is much more well worded than me, but you just understand its activities for three purposes. One is to help with the grief, part of suicide prevention, uh, uh, part of suicide prevention activities, and third thing is to prevent suicidal behavior. So you got to look at that. You got to look at asking. So you got to look at, that's the understanding of it, and then simple actions, asking, knowing, and then you can start building the service. You got to scratch somewhere. Even the most, I think we have. Some of us are very fortunate to work around, to have known services which are very effective. Those effective services came from the question of asking, and it came from the place of empathy and concern and care, and the recognition that the why this is a horrible thing to have happened. We should not let people suffer because of what it happens. I'm quite sure people will be looking at numbers, or how many people are affected. In high income countries is 135, so it is certainly a lot of people. It's a whole lot of people, and in tightly knit communities, it's so much more. We can't reach everyone when we're starting, but when your service matures and ages like fine wine, its effects will be well well be affected across the spectrum. So you have to start somewhere. Um, Even if you don't have a dedicated post-vention service, which is most places are like that still, there is always a role on meeting. There's always a role in asking, and the role is always around what can we do to help. Sometimes the family has questions. You may not have answers to the questions, but listening and being that listening here to be seen, heard, validated, it's still very powerful. All right. And to tell them like where else to get help. Sometimes people don't get help because they don't feel they can get help there. or they don't know how to get help. It remains the always spot question that comes for every advocacy talk regarding mental health: where to get help. It's that question that every time you can repeat and repeat and repeat, and everybody invariably wants to know about it again and again and again. So I think you can always put that there. You can look at it that way. You can look at devising creative ways within your community where you can provide help. So I guess that's where maybe you can sort of start. And once you're started, you can have more exciting ideas where here's where I put on a little different of a hat that you can start building services. You can start seeing how you can build a network within the community, a surveillance within the community to hear things what others don't hear, that common news don't hear. So when you hear, and if you realize if you're within a group of people who are working towards this, you hear about losses all over the place, and you all can work together to support. We have supported losses from far and near, but it is possible. We have supported losses in the most remote place and the most urban place. Sometimes the silence that comes after suicide is so deafening that you could be right in the most urbanized place and still not be seen and heard. Just remember, if you're not, I mean, I hope to, with someone who is listening to suicide loss, and if maybe you've knocked the door, nobody has reached out to you, it's always okay to also reach out to help, to another door that opens. There are so many services out there that you can call and just say, I need help. Can you connect me to my local help? You can try 15555. You can connect to AWAS. I hope at least that's where it scratches. So if you are a professional and you are in a service and you have no idea what to do, maybe that could be the simple thing to do. Just give the numbers of these people. They're already doing the service.
Yeah. I like what you said. Even if you're in an urban place, it sometimes you still feel alone. Like you can be in a crowd of people, you can be among all your friends, but you can still sometimes you can still be alone. That's why postvention is so important, right, Doctor? I believe we have spoken once before. If you can help to refresh my memory, for every one suicide, it affects how many people, Doctor?
100.
135.
I see, 135 for every one suicide. So there is 135 people that would benefit, would probably need postvention support. And see, this shows how important it is postvention. And I believe this is quite something that is quite new in the scene. And I hope that perhaps in future that more efforts and more, how do you say, more focus is given to postvention in every scene. So we have reached the end actually of our webinar. So thank you very much, Dr. Ravi and Kak Ngah, for sharing your profound insights and experiences tonight. We do have one question that is given to me privately to either both Kak Ngah or Dr. Ravi, if you want to share. How do feelings of guilt or what ifs thoughts manifest in your experience, and how have you addressed them?
Okay, I can start. Perhaps like I said earlier on in my sharing, feeling guilty, it's a given. Thank you for the one who's asking. That guilt is there, it's going to be there, but I feel like it's very, very important to process it. Whatever you're going through, you need to work on it and process it, because if you just leave it alone, like sweep, 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 like pretend like everything is okay, it will get to you. You will end up feeling the burden, more and more, I feel, through my experience. So you have to find a way to talk about it, to process it, and to understand also it's not your fault, because like, when we were discussing, because suicide is multifactorial, it's not just on you. You did not cause the death per se. It's easier said than done, but there's also support groups. I feel like these things sometimes, yes, in Malaysia it's very hard to get to see a therapist. Either it's very expensive, or for the government, the free ones, it will take a long, long time to get support. But find support groups. AWAS is one of them. We have support group. We have ways to connect you with other survivors, other people who are going through the same grief, that guilt. I remember having a parent, a father, asking me, Kak Ngah, is it okay? Is it okay if I tell my other family members that my daughter died by a heart attack? He asked me that, and I asked him, why Pakcik, why do you want to say it's a heart attack? He said, for obvious reason, because I'm embarrassed. I don't know what to tell other people. It's such a stigma, taboo, and all that. I said, okay, Pakcik, if you think that is the right thing to do, for whatever reason, respectfully, you can say that to others, but you yourself know that it's important for you to acknowledge and not be in denial, because when you are in denial, like you don't want to, I guess, own that pain. Other things can develop, perhaps from the medical point of view. You can say something, but the more you pretend like it's not there, I think the more it will grow on you, and the pain becomes more and more. And sometimes you would need to ask questions like, why did he take your life? Simple questions like that. Having somebody who understand, or somebody who have gone through it, will walk you through it, because at the end of the day, you do not have the answer. You will not have the answer. You have to be at peace of not getting the answer. And the way I be at peace is for me to tell myself that he was not well. He was sick, actually, because for many reasons. The way he died, the way he ended his life, it did not make sense. This whole suicide issue, or this loss, it doesn't make sense. It will never make sense. But you need to be okay, and you need to find comfort in it, however way. And at the end of the day, of course, especially as a Muslim, I feel like people will always say things, awful things, like, these are, ahli neraka, they'll go to hellfire and things like that. And I feel there's also explanation behind this. For example, if I may, um, like sometimes people say, how do you stay sane at the fact that, how can you accept at the fact that your loved one will go to hell? I said, no, it's not our business to decide whether he is in hell or not. For me, my God is merciful. And in Islam too, if you have gastric, if you're pregnant, you don't need to fast, for example, in Ramadan, right? Or if you sakit lutut, sakit belakang, if you have all these aches, you don't have to solat, like do your prayer standing, or there are rukhsah, there are exceptions. And I believe because he was not well, because he was, not well, that it made him be, do such things. And this, I take comfort in the fact that he will be exempted in that sense. So I guess there's a lot of things that you can and you must process, and it's very, very important to process it, because it will affect your mental health, your well-being, if it's not being processed and not being supported, or you know if you don't find the answers within you, or find the peace within you, I guess.
Yes, I guess that's really, really important, where you want to think those what ifs and guilt, right? Yep. I guess that whole keyword that Alia said, which was process, it's really important. You gotta work on those emotions. Either you do it on yourself or with a professional. It's often very easy if your professional is validating, knows what they are doing. That's important. The second part is extremely important. Uh, it's important because you want to really see where that question comes from, because it's not a logic question. You're not, most people, nearly a lot of people who face suicide loss are not delusional, they're not challenging reality and all of that. But you got to realize that denial is a very big part of grief. That whole part where we discuss denial, what do you call it? Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. It's, you see, you get all of that, and you see that when you want to ask what if, what could I've done, and that whole part of the guilt, you want to look and examine that relationship of you with that person, and that could be things that you wish you could have done, or you could may not have done. And there's all this should have, would have, I should have done this, I could have done this, I might have done this, all of those things. And I think it's also important that rather than saying that they are dead, no need to talk about it, it's not going to bring them back alive. I think the point is also at some point within yourself, you know they're not going to come back. You know they're not going to come back, but you want to know, you want to process that feeling, because that whole part where you would think that it could have been prevented and all of that, and that the sense of responsibility, that actually is often a manifestation of the relationship you had with that person. It could be your, it could be because grief is often, you only grieve because you cared for the person. Well, the love and the care and whatever your relationship with the person is also the source of the grief. If you didn't care for the person, you hardly would not grieve. So this is a manifestation of your continuing relationship with the deceased. It's important when therapists work with these people, with people who are with grief, they cannot accept, the important premise is you can't actually talk about it as though person dead, relationship ends, that kind of thing. It's an ongoing thing, and how you define your relationship. Many people make at peace their relationship with people they have lost in their life due to many reasons, natural causes of death. It changes across time. If you have lost a parent or a loved one, or parent, at that moment when your parent passed on, you would have some emotions, and then 5 years down the road you have another one, 10 years down the road, and that also signifies the growth of you as a person, and how you change that pain into person, the growth after suicide. So this process is necessary. All right, this process is very, very, very necessary, and I think it's so important for us to know that if you can't do it on it yourself or with people or in a circle, you can always do it with a therapist or somebody who knows what they're doing. Yeah, and that can be helpful because we have many techniques in how to explore emotions, and there's sometimes it takes a while. It cannot process it within 1 week. I really hope people don't come to it. It's not Panadol Actifast here, unfortunately. I'm not making an advertisement for the thing, but it's not something fast. It takes a while. And sometimes and I think it's also important that sometimes you process that grief a bit fast as well. If you're in the field, quite cepat, 2 weeks already, you'll be able to get through this. It's just different. Losses are different, and the way we build up is different, right? But it is important to recognize that sometimes this grief is very protected and long-standing, and you need to process it. If you sweep it under the rug, what will happen is mental illness will certainly come and knock on your door. That's the least of it, and suicidal behavior will follow quite far behind, quite somewhere in that horizon can happen. So please don't do that.
Right. And if I may add, I think it's okay. Give yourself permission to feel all the pain, all the grief, all the everything that you're feeling, and also the permission to look for, keep searching for. If you one time you go to seek help, and that person, whether it's therapist or whatever support group, whatever it is, NGO, whatever it is that you've gone to, and you feel like no, they're not validating enough, they're not supportive enough, they're not for me, find another one. Keep find, because there will be, if you stop there, then your process gets stunted. And there could be other things, and also people who are grieving. I feel like today after working with your therapist, maybe after whatever 2 years or whatever, you feel like, oh, I'm okay now, it's good, and then that. But you never know. 10 years or 5 years down the road, another grief happened, something happened, something triggered you that can come back, and you reliving the moment and feel like, oh my god, I need help. It's okay to say that you're still not okay. It's okay to know that this trauma, sometimes they come back and you need help again. You need that support, because support is very, very important, and it's essential to the well-being of survivors, I feel. So have your key people, who can really support you and understand you. There's a time when I will just, contact Dr. Ravi and say, look, I just need to say something, because something triggered me in the headline, in the newspaper, in the news or something. Sometimes he just give me one mean it, just validate, like, yeah, this is awful, they shouldn't have said this, and that's it. Sometimes having somebody to just recognize or validate, acknowledge that, it's not right for these people to say these things, and you are feeling what you're feeling, what you're feeling is right. So sometimes it takes some people to just help you and support you in this manner for you to go through this bumps in your grief, I feel.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ravi and Kak Ngah, for that wonderful answer. I hope it helps with the answer. So without we realize, we already at the end of our webinar tonight. It's already 10 p.m. But before we wrap up, we would like to remind you that if you wish to register your attendance for tonight's webinar, for the certificate, you can click the link included in the comment section. And registration is only open until midnight tonight. So be sure to register before it closes.
Yep. And if you find this session to be of value and you actually like to support Dee Hati Center, you could always try to contribute to us through by scanning actually the QR code down there to donate to our organization. And if you would like to learn more about us, you can always visit our website and our social media pages. And also, I would like to share as well that together with AWAS, we have actually developed a self-help kit leaflet for suicide loss survivors that contains various tips in understanding what you may be going through and how it can help you. So if you want to access that, you can always visit our website at dgrief.com.my and download a copy there.
Yeah, we hope tonight's discussion have given us some clarity, comfort, as well as tools to move forward. I would like to thank both of our panels tonight and all of you who join us tonight. Let's keep this conversation going in our homes, community, and in our hearts, especially. Please take care, everyone, and please have a peaceful evening.
Hey, thank
Bye-bye.
you, everyone. Thank you, our speakers, and thank you to our audience who is in our chat box. Right, couldn't see it right now, but thank you very much to everyone. Good night.
Thank you.